another episode after a long hiatus. People busy, racing is a grinding season, and, well, we're back now. End of the season kind of podcast vibes today. Here for the shelf hangers, I'm joined by the king and huge guy in general, Jesse Isidore. Not driver of the year, I guess. Got outvoted in the Lone Ellie Award polls. Can't believe it. You got to teach that. So if anybody doesn't know, Jesse has an army of little kids who absolutely love him at every racetrack. I was surprised you didn't try to get them to vote and run up the scoreboard there for
I got
accused
of unfair play last year. So I just kind of let the chips fall where they may this year. Maybe next year I'll mobilize the children, dude. You don't want to know what happens when I mobilize the kiddos, dude. The mini late model army, dude. They'll be out there voting like wildfire, dude. You know.
So joining us is not Jason. It's our first ever guest. Jason can't make it because he is snuggled up into bed.
He's a tired boy.
He's a tired boy. He's a. If you watch any of the iRacing stuff that we do, you might notice
he's a nightmare.
The Bodio show. It's Dave Bodio. Dave, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. Hey, quick, introduce yourself.
Full disclosure, this guy couldn't drive a pine plug up a duck's ass, dude. He's terrible.
Yeah,
Go on, Dave. Tell us how cool you are, dude.
I'm the number one victim racing with Jesse. I get wrecked by him all the time. The king is the king of wrecking me. Outside of that, I do a little racing up in New England. Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Plead the fifth on those accusations. I will not confirm nor deny the allegations. I feel like I'm being unfairly treated. So we'll have to agree to disagree. I think Dave's a liar. So
it's been this way for 5 years now, though. This is nothing new.
Yeah, he's terrible.
The proof is in the pudding. We just watched some replays earlier because we just ran our league, and it could go either way, Jesse. Not the most innocent.
Just depends on how many times this season Dave wrecks me. I mean, I could win the points, or I could get wrecked out of them, like I have in seasons past. Some people take points away from me in between races. That's none of my business. I can only do what I can do, which is be the GOAT. Okay. And the chips will fall where they may, Daniel.
Oh, all right. Enough about how you're a bad driver, Jesse. Let's go on to the real life stuff. Jesse, it's the end of the season. Dave, end of the season for you guys up there, I'm assuming. I don't know how long your guys' season goes up there. I mean, we have another until the end of October down here, but really for the regional area, the McKean, State Line, Erie's area, we're all getting them big end of the year 2-day shows. Jesse, how do you think your season's gone? We haven't talked in almost 2 months on this podcast, over a month and a half, actually. You wrapped up some points battles at different places.
I mean, my season's gone pretty good. The tail end was rough. I had a lot of DNFs, a lot of motor issues. I think at one point we went through 3 motors in 3 weeks.
2 in one night.
Absolute freak accidents. I had one really weird freak accident where I had a lithium battery with a brand new rectifier, brand new motor, brand new stator, and it overcharged the lithium battery and just unloaded the entire battery into the wiring harness. And when it did that, it grounded to the motor and fried everything. It welded my ignition switch together and all kinds of crazy stuff. All this stuff I've never seen. The motor builder sent me all these pictures of the motor was basically a big ass resistor, and all the little metal pieces, like my valves and valve springs and stuff, you can see they were clearly hot. You know what I mean? It's a really weird thing I've never actually seen before. But yeah, I mean, so other than that, I mean, pretty good season, quite a few wins, a lot of good runs. Yeah, I mean, I have nothing bad to say. I would have liked to have had a little better showing at McKean. I had a lot of DNFs there. I went from leading the points by a long shot to I think I finished second by a point or two. I felt like I could have done better there, but when you're blowing motors left and right, there's not a lot you can do, just part of the gig, unfortunately.
Dave, how's your season been?
Season was pretty short this year. I did one race at New Hampshire Motor Speedway during the NASCAR weekend in June. I think I ran third in that one. We had faced a lot of weather and stuff. Outside of that, I had a lot of work obligations this year, so it was a short season. And then where I run up here is pretty far north into New Hampshire, so it's already pretty cold up there, and season's over. I think like dirt track scene in New England, I think there's one more race this weekend, this weekend or next weekend up at Unity, deep in the Maine for Sprint Cars of New England. And then
this is your first year racing as a dad, isn't it?
Second this year.
Second?
Yeah. So it's tough, right? A lot of, it's a long day. I mean, the track is over 3 hours from me.
Do you bring the little man with you to the racetrack?
No, she's like in bed by 7 o'clock religiously. So
that's good. Does she sleep through the night?
Yeah, every night.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I'm not.
I figured when you told me you were having one, I was like, well, he just built that sprint car. It's gonna sit. But yeah. Dave is like ridiculously good in one of these micros, by the way. Didn't you go in one of your races this year from like 20th to 1st or something?
Last year I went.
Was that last year?
17th to 1st, and the week after that I went 17th to 4th, like by halfway, and then smoked a U tire.
typical Dave. I'm sure it was the Ute tire's fault. It walked right into his way, dude.
It just jumped out of nowhere, dude.
Yeah, it just came out of nowhere. So yeah, I mean they're pretty fun. Run them for a long time. I love like the concept of them, even the mini lates, right? It's convenient. You can do a lot of it yourself. It's not, you need 10 people there at the track with you to do it, type of thing.
Well, I would like everybody at home to know, I've given Dave an open invitation to come run a mini late model whenever he wants. All he's got to do is show up, and he won't do it, dude. He just won't do it. So you're going to have to guilt trip him on the internet. Everybody send him a message request and call him names and tell him to come run a mini late model in Pennsylvania. That's where I'm at with it. I'll lobby. I'll tag him when we release this. I'll tag him, and you got to message him hate mail until he shows up to Pennsylvania. That's
and most of it will be from my own mother, because I think she's one of the only people that listen to this, and she's
that boy, Mrs. Nelly. You go tell Dave exactly what you think of him. I second whatever she says.
Jesse is such a nice young guy, and Dave's always wrecking him.
Yeah, honestly, I'd love to. It's just far, right?
Yeah, it is.
At least an 8-hour drive for me to get there.
Well, we'll have to do it on a weekend where you can come and stay and pound out 3 races in a weekend or something, so that you can make the most of the trip. But we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. I'm building some cars this winter, and I'm sure they won't all sell. So you're about my size, so it's perfect. You can just jump in.
I don't think anybody's your size, brother. You're about 7'12".
As long as I got the one with the 750 in it, I'm good.
They all got 750s in. So you're good, dude. I'm not gonna build one that's legal. So just kidding. Just full disclosure. Just kidding. But yeah. Either way,
short race season for me.
Are you planning on running more next year?
I'd like to get a couple more in. The NASCAR weekend, I think, got pushed into the playoffs next year in like September, October, so it'll be a little bit later in the year. That's one that I don't like missing. Just it's a the place is electric because it's like the
Mhm.
racetrack is in the middle of like the campground for NASCAR. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, the place is just packed.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, yeah.
How do we get the mini late models on the roster, dude?
There ain't none around here. That's the problem.
Well,
Those
we'll
things are
travel,
unheard of
dude.
up here.
We'll travel. We'll travel. I can rally the boys, dude. We can bring at least 15 of them.
Do you imagine, dude? Hey,
I know, right?
listen, after, and I don't think this will drop before this, our super secret test on asphalt, dude.
Yeah, we're taking the mini late models to an asphalt track. That's going to go really badly.
Everybody's really excited, and by everybody, it's just me.
Yeah, everybody who's actually got to drive a car is like worried they might ruin their car. So it's weird how that works.
Why does that fit perfectly? Like,
I know, dude. It's exactly.
You're always running funny stuff on iRacing, and now you're bringing.
I think they'll be fine because they run a lot of. So the track is, it's pretty banked, and I think it would race good. And I mean, they do dirt cars on asphalt in many different places. I don't see why we can't do it.
I mean,
you've seen like the Northeast Modifieds at Wall Stadium.
I've not seen that.
I haven't seen that, but I have seen them run that road course deal up in Canada. That's always really cool. And I mean, I'm sure it's oh no, the Empire Super Sprints up. They go to oh man, as you see, I'm a huge sprint car guy. I know exactly where they take them. God, where is it? They run 360 dirt sprints on asphalt at this track, Spencer Speedway, I think. I'm gonna get crucified by.
Sprint cars are a little bit different though, because like you guys don't have like a ton of suspension travel and shit, right? Like you guys are pretty like low to the ground and low slung already, right?
No, there's a lot of travel.
Is there?
Yeah, a few inches at least.
See, I just like with the bar cars, what I worry about is they hike so much, and there's late models in general have a hard time not grip flipping on dirt. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's a lot of things you can do to make them rotate. And our mini late models don't have anywhere near the travel that obviously a late model has. But the only thing I'm worried about is going in and tumbling because I have a hard enough time keeping my left rear on the ground as it is, let alone,
We'll see. Put about 500 pounds in the right or the left rear, dude. And I'll sit on the back of it for you. That'll weigh you down. You ain't flipping anything over.
That'll go well, dude.
Daniel, it's the Evan Mills Raceway Park for the
Evan Mills. See, I was close.
Kevin Ward Jr. Memorial Asphalt Spectacular.
That's quite the name.
You just wait. If we get this Chapel Hill race, dude, the name's going to be longer than the T-shirt.
All right.
It's going to wrap around underneath the armpits.
The only thing I'm worried about is I think you're going to have to pay our guys to go to an asphalt track because, and don't get me wrong, they might be excited. They might just be excited enough to do something kooky and out there that they might just show up. The big worry for us is, like, what do you do to set the car up? Like, if we can get people to show up like a couple times at the beginning of next season and like get their feet wet and realize that it's not that big of a deal, it's not going to be that scary. I think we could put it on. I think we can make it work. But it's going to be all about showing them that there's no reason to panic, Yeah,
it's getting people excited. In my promotional experience, and I don't want to, I feel like when I say that, I don't mean to sound pretentious. I've only promoted 4 races or whatever, 5 races coming into this McKean deal coming up next Friday. It's getting people excited is half the battle. Getting people there is another battle. But hey, enough, about our season and all this wacky stuff we're doing. Let's couple topics that have come across my mind here. We haven't recorded since August 6th, so the passing of Scott Bloomquist has not been covered on the show, which is a a real bummer to a huge loss to our racing community, as someone who means so much, not only as a driver, but from the many, many things that, has came through. And, Bloomquist probably was one of those innovator types. He won a lot of races, but he was probably innovating a whole bunch, and I guess, to kind of piggyback off of that, what do you think Scott Bloomquist's legacy will be as as a guy in the dirt scene, the dirt community? And I only ask this because dirt late model racing as it is now and what he kind of grew it as, from where he started to where it's ended up now, we won't really be able to see the impact that he had until we're farther out. You know what I mean? Like, we don't see all the things that Dale Earnhardt really did as, these amazing feats or these things that he was doing different until now. We're 20 plus years later and, seeing everything, unfold. Or again, we look at guys from the 80s, 70s, 60s in NASCAR, not to say this is a NASCAR podcast, but kind of like in the same vein of, oh, these guys were the, innovators that got us to where we are now. Just kind of quick thoughts on this of what do you think we'll be saying, or say, man, Scott really did X, Y, and Z? Because I know a lot of places and a lot of people have talked about the memory and all the great things. I got to watch Scott win at Thunder Mountain in his last win, and that was really cool, and that meant a lot to me because I think Scott is, should be at least in everybody's list of heroes, whatever you think of him or not. He is one of the guys.
Yeah. So do you want to cover this first, Dave, or do you want me to?
Mine will probably be a bit shorter.
Okay.
So I'm definitely not the biggest dirt late model guy, but Scott was really the first person, their first driver that I really knew of in that world. And hearing what he accomplished was crazy. I think, right, like one of the first races I really saw of him was he was driving without the left front wheel in some race in like a B main or something. They put it in the show, and that was pretty cool. But hearing him talk about how shocks work with the car and things like that just showed like the innovative mindset that he had. And I respect that a ton out of anyone that knows the technical side of it and isn't just jumping in a car and driving it. He was a true innovator, and I think he made late model racing better than he left it, right? Or better than it was when he arrived. And I think that's one of the big things that I appreciate someone like that.
And he's one of them guys that, love him or hate him, you tuned in to watch to see whether he was going to get his ass beat or he was going to, dominate or do something crazy, or that, what was it, the World or the Dream, where he got sent to the tail and still won the race. Like, dude.
Then when they interviewed him, he said, I would have lapped the field if they didn't send me to the back.
Yeah.
The only shot they had of me not winning this race was to send me to the back. I'd have lapped the field if they didn't, or whatever it was that he said.
I honestly think that was the fastest dirt late model anybody's ever seen up to that point. Probably ever.
Well, so my thoughts on Scott Bloomquist. So I think the reason a lot of people end up divided on stuff like this, so I don't know what day it was that Scott Bloomquist died, but let's say it was Tuesday. On Monday, Scott Bloomquist would have had a lot more haters, right? And everybody it was weird seeing, it was both reassuring and weird for me watching, because a week or two earlier was the wreck, right? Where he flipped and everybody was calling him washed up and saying that he should quit and all that stuff. And I felt pretty discouraged when everybody was talking like that about him for a couple of reasons. I mean, I feel like we don't give these guys enough credit. Like racing at like the Lucas or World of Outlaws level, it's so much higher of a level than anybody. Like people go to your weekly dirt track and they go, oh, well, these guys are the same thing. It's not the same thing, right? And Scott just shows up to a crown jewel event and goes out, and you should be thankful that you're getting to watch it, let alone have all these weird comments about how he's washed up. Like, if he's in the front half of that field after being off for as much of a time as he was off, that's a solid performance, man. And it just felt really discouraging to me to watch everybody just shit on him like they were. And then when he passed, everybody just kind of came together and was like, you know, we all shit on him for all those years, but we really did love him. You know what I mean? So that was encouraging to me. But Scott is a human being, like is a race car driver, like Dave said, was super innovative, super cool. Like I love listening to him talk about just about anything. And I've had the pleasure to meet him a couple times in person. I met him a handful of times when I was a kid, met him a handful of times as an adult. I believe my dad owned one of his cars at one point. I mean, he was just a really cool dude. Like, he was funny. I mean, he was the reason people call him the Dale Earnhardt of our sport isn't just because of the innovation, because of the wins, because of all that stuff. Like there's a reason they called him Darth Vader. That dude was like a whole ass presence, you know? And he had a period of time where he was just on another planet. I remember watching him one night. I believe it was a World of Outlaws race in probably like 2008, 9, 10, something like that. I think I was either just getting out of high school or just, I don't know. It was in my formative years, right? So let's say between 2006 and 2010, because if I get it wrong, somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong. But it felt like he almost lapped the whole field. It was crazy. And it was a World of Outlaws race. It was the biggest, most stacked race he could have possibly been in. And this dude was just on Easy Street out there putzing around, just driving around everybody. It was the most absurd thing I've ever seen in my life. And there was a period of time where Scott Bloomquist was on a different plane of existence than the rest of the fucking world, you know? And that's why he's such a legend. And he knew more about the race car that he was driving than almost anybody in the field, right? And Dave made a comment about how he doesn't just show up and drive the car. That's the difference between a guy like Scott Bloomquist or a guy like Dale Earnhardt and the rest of the field. He not only is he this like larger than life personality, but he was also an innovator on the technical side. He was kind of a badass dude. I mean, he's got a lot of like viral moments. He's said a lot of funny stuff. I mean, he never was afraid to speak his mind. He was a little bit kooky, said he got abducted by aliens or whatever, you know, and you could say what you want about all that stuff, but there's a reason everybody cares about what he has to say. You know, he's not your cookie cutter by all intents and purposes. Like if you were to talk to somebody who was like a sponsorship rep who was telling you how to get sponsorships and things like that, they would tell you don't act like him. You know what I mean? He's lippy, he's talking about getting abducted by aliens, you know, he says all kinds of crazy stuff. Like if you listen to him on the Dale Jr. podcast, I mean it's the dude was something, you know. And you don't get guys like that a lot, and you got to appreciate them while you have them, because then they're just gone, you know. And everybody loved to hate Scott Bloomquist, and now that he's gone, it's like there's a vacuum in dirt racing, you know. There's a bunch of sponsor friendly race car drivers that we love or whatever, you know. They're fast, they're whatever, but nobody fills those shoes, you know. He was a personality, and I've always been a huge fanboy of Bloomquist, whether it was cool or not. So, you know, it's cool to see the whole dirt world rally around him, I think is ultimately where I'm at. He's an innovator. He's all those things. But to me, his legacy will always be that he was like the coolest dude in dirt racing, you know.
He is just one of those guys that there'll never be another guy like him, but it sets him so far apart, like you said about working on the car, and you know, and I think a lot of guys, and this isn't, again, I don't know why NASCAR is so heavy on my mind, but one of the topics in that is you have all these young kids that come in that don't know how to work on the car. They don't know what things do, what adjustments to set up on the car. And I think, a greater understanding of how the car is set up or how, everything is, really helps you be a better driver of, well, why did we put this shock in? Why is this going to work like this? So it's definitely something. And, Dave, I know you're new to this show. And usually what happens is we kind of start on one topic and kind of spur into another one. And this is going to be one that kind of, well, you guys are talking about, Scott, about, peer domination and being one of the GOATs of all time. And how we can talk about this at a regional level is every region has their guy, right? There is the best guy in the region, hands down, the guy that shows up and everybody's racing for second. And I think that back in Bloomer's day, when he was just like the final boss of dirt track racing, is what I'll say is, he unloaded his car, 80% chance Scott's going to be winning that race, And around here in our region, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we have Dave Hess, Max Blair used to just come and be just this world beater, the guy that's always up front, always super good. I feel like there's a discussion to be had of, Jesse, you like saying this, a rising tide raises all ships. Is kind of the discussion of, having a guy that good in the area. It's going to suck for the fans, that want to see a really good race, because there are just some nights where these guys are going to give them an old-fashioned shit stomping. But I want to say, does it help or hurt having a guy like that win so many races and so dominant? Does it bring people to the track? Does it, as racers, do you want to see that guy unload, or do you want to, come out there and, say maybe you're the guy that's running second always to this guy, and you're like, oh, good, I can have a chance to win. I guess, what are your thoughts about, these guys being just like the GOATs of each region? Or
so do you want to do this one first, Dave, or you want me to? You'll go? Okay.
I've always really appreciated that, right? Like you could even say, right, like right now when Kyle Larson shows up at a sprint car race, right? He's kind of that guy. And you don't get to see, and even like, right, Corey Day now, and I think he's probably going to end up going the NASCAR route, but there's something special about watching those types of people. And even regionally, right, we had for a long time, and it's very ironic, but we had, whether it was Ted Christopher, right? I'm up in asphalt modified country. We had Ted Christopher for a long time. We had Mike Stefanik. Ironically, both of them also got killed in plane crashes, which is kind of crazy. But those guys, right? Like they unload, and they're going to be right there for the win every night. And it's the older I get, the more I appreciate it, because you just never know when you're going to have someone, achieve that again, right? Like it's kind of, you're watching history, and it's something to be appreciated.
And I think from the regional guy's perspective, right? So I hear, so like you can filter dirt track guys into like two different categories, right? There's the guy who's winning is cheating, and then there's the rest of us that are chasing him, right? And there's a lot of guys just, I love having a guy like that. I just do, right? If there's somebody that I'm chasing, I want a rabbit to chase. And I actually get kind of bored if I'm the rabbit, right? If I'm the rabbit everybody's chasing, I get kind of bored, and I start thinking maybe I should move up. You know what I mean? I personally love having a rabbit to chase. And I'm a firm believer that like being uncomfortable will always benefit you in the long run, right? So if somebody's unloading every week and just waxing you, you're going to get faster because you don't want to get waxed, man. You know, I think having 2 or 3 of those guys in your region is great. I think, like, you look at our modified division, right? The UMPs. It's kind of like the most stacked division in our region now. It wasn't like that when my dad raced, but it's like that now. I mean, there's a lot of fast cars in that division. You know, there's a lot of one-off guys that win. There's 3 or 4 guys that are in contention at all times. You know what I mean? They produce some of the best racing, I think, at the moment. I know that's not going to be popular for Jason. I guess you should have came to the podcast, Jason, if you don't want me talking about how cool UMPs are, dude. But long story short, I'm a firm believer that you need those guys because I think they elevate the overall level. And I think you might have 3 or 4 boring years while everybody tries to catch up. And that's kind of collateral damage, right? But I think after everybody starts to raise to that level, it can only produce good stuff for the region, right? And you might get to a period of time where, like, I remember when my dad was back racing, let's say that there was a hot period between like 01 to 2010, right? It just seemed like everywhere you unloaded, there might be 5 guys that could win that night, you know? And that group of dudes has had raced together since probably the 90s. I mean, so you're talking about guys who have raced door to door with each other for the better part of a decade or more. In some cases, probably 2 decades. You're talking about guys who have learned from each other, helped each other, lent each other parts. I mean, there's guys who are friends, guys who are enemies. I mean, that just kind of creates a legendary circumstance. It's like a melting pot for talent, you know, because I remember Dad having to go through B mains to get into like just weekly events, you know, and it was a really cool period in our local history. And I look at that group of dudes and like, so Dave Hess was in that group of dudes, right? And I wouldn't say Dave Hess was ever a mid-packer, but he wasn't the Dave Hess you remember today, you know. He came up in that group, and now he's a standout in the current group, you know. And I don't know, it's just watching the racing evolve. I think we need more guys like Dave Hess. We need more guys like Max Blair. We need as many of those guys as you can get because I think ultimately they elevate the entire region, you know. Even if you're just driving their hand-me-downs or picking up whatever knowledge they can pass down to you, you should be doing a lot of your own stuff and coming up with your own program and chasing that guy because you don't want his leftover information. You want your program to be better, right? And that's how you're going to stay in the lead for a long-term period of time, you know? So that's my 2 cents on that. I think those guys are a net positive for the region. I know that's an unpopular take for most people. I think having a rabbit to chase is really good for everybody. I really do. So
We definitely have, and I know everybody knows that I'm a big UMP fanboy, so I absolutely love the UMPs. I think they provide the best racing because of how good everybody is. Joel Watson definitely said it best. He's been one of the best in the business for a long time when it comes to that kind of thing, right? And he said, man, this was a lot more fun 15 years ago when everybody wasn't so good. So that is definitely a point to say.
Yeah, I think it goes back to rising tide rises all ships, right? And that holds really true. If you have that guy that everyone is chasing, right, then they're going to go out and try and improve their stuff. It happened up here, and now we have a really strong field of probably 15 cars that could win every night on any given night.
So to pivot from this, something that actually Bodio brought up is Jesse. You can stop me if we've talked about this. I don't know if we've talked about it or not, but it seemed this year social media has been top of conversation more than ever, and it's a two-way street. I know that we've had conversations about this. You have a lot of around here. a lot of track bashing on social media, a lot of people just being a kind of, well, lack of better words, a bunch of douchebags on social media, and some racetracks don't always respond in the best way. How about we put it that way, Jesse?
Yeah.
It being a two-way street is what I'm kind of getting at here, and something that I wanted to bring up with this is for the future of our sport. Do you believe? And I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' opinions about social media and racing and this kind of thing. But do you guys think that social media is playing a huge factor in not only the way tracks maybe operate, whether it be rainouts or whatever, or not being able to pull in fans because everybody's like, well, fuck that place. I heard from my buddy that it's the worst thing ever, da 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 da, whatever. I guess opinions on that, opinions on solutions, because I don't want to just be here being the old man that, sits here and yells at clouds all day. I'm here to talk solutions too. I mean, where do we go? Because I feel like social media has been one of the best things and worst things that has ever happened to this sport.
Yeah, I mean that I mean, even in life, right? It's probably one of the best and worst things over like way beyond the racetrack. But honestly, like it's so frustrating. Like, you talk like these track owners, right? A lot of them are doing it on, as part of their retirement or side hustle, right? Like on the local level, there's really not a lot of people out there that are going to be making a ton of money doing it. And you see these tracks, they'll like the forecast looks horrible, right? And they'll cancel and they just get lit up on social media. And it's like, do you think this person who's spending all their time and money to try and run this racetrack wants to cancel just to, make you mad? It's so frustrating to watch that. And yeah, I talk to the track owner up here quite a bit, and like I know it gets, frustrating for them, and a lot of people I don't think will realize what they had until it's gone. And you see a lot more tracks closing than you do opening, and I know that there's a lot more to it, but um, being berated on social media, I'm sure it doesn't help it any. And there's a lot of variables that I don't think like the general fan or even a lot of racers really think about, right? Like that rain out, if the track owner says, hey, we're going to try and do it, and one car touches the racetrack, then they have to pay the insurance policy on that, right? So it's a deep thing that is not doing the regional stuff any favors, right? And we're always going to have the national tours and those big tracks, right? They're the ones that are getting the big money and filling the stands for those big shows. But eventually, if we lose the local stuff, that's all going to end up getting affected too.
Yeah, and it's a massive trickle down that nobody considers, and it's one of the weird undercurrent points of the major tours, like your World of Outlaws, your Lucas Oils, your High Limits, and like the tours of that ilk. One of the things that I've noticed, so when my dad raced, it was mostly weekly racing, and we had ULMS, but ULMS was more of, I'm not going to say it was an afterthought because people still tried to run all the races and win the points. And it was obviously still a big part of the racing community, but people put a lot of emphasis on running local stuff. And at some point I watched the tours and the like bigger series, like they almost annexed local short track racing. And I said ULMS as an example. I'm not singling them out. I mean, we talked about like 4 tours already, the Empire Super Sprints, there's the New York 6 Days and the Micros. There's all these different tours, right? And I know why they brand themselves as tours, because it brings people to the racetrack, right? And it's why ULMS can command a purse like they do. It's why all these big organizations can command money like they do. But the problem with slapping a brand on something and taking it on the road like that is people are coming to see that particular version of racing now. They're not coming to see the races, right? And as a guy who's at the racetrack 2 to 3 times a week, I've seen some pretty incredible racing, like just on a local level this year. Like we watched 2 street stocks at McKean finish in a dead heat this year. Like that was pretty cool. I mean, there's been some pretty awesome fucking races just on a local level in a weekly series. You know what I'm saying? And
we saw an Isidore family battle this past weekend. That was, that was pretty solid at the local level.
Me and my dad duked it out for like 12 laps at Blanket Hill. I mean, that was almost a dead heat. I mean, put it this way, if it was 1 lap shorter, we would have finished literally bumper to bumper on the backstretch. Like I have photo, like the photographer at Blanket Hill took a photo of me and my dad racing with 3 to go, 2 to go, 1 to go, and when we crossed the line, and I beat him by a nose. And the first 2 laps before that, like 2 to go and 1 to go, we literally I don't know if you could have gave one of us a winner. It would have just meant it would have like boiled down to where our transponder was. You know what I mean? Awesome. You couldn't see it on the photo, that's for sure. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we've seen some really cool racing just on a local level, but like you see a packed house when ULMS shows up, or when the Empire Super Sprints show up, or when the World of Outlaws come to town. Or I feel like people don't understand, you know, you could go a lot cheaper every week and see almost the same thing with some different guys that you might see at Walmart. You know what I mean? It's kind of a shame that the tours have become synonymous with good racing when, you know, us guys that are at the racetrack every week, we see awesome racing every single week. You know what I mean? It's something. Like I've seen some really good crate races this year at McKean. Really good. I mean, there's been some awesome racing this year. So
I think part of it that people also kind of miss is that you don't know who you're watching, right? Like you could go to your local short track and that guy could be very well the next big thing. You know, probably someone younger, but like back in the day when Whip City was out here, and that, right, that's one of those things you don't know what you had until it was gone. I would do anything to have that place back now, but like I was racing with Ryan Preece and David Gravel, right? And even Ryan Briganti, who's a Cup crew chief, and you know, these guys you could have just gone down there and seen them. Aaron Crocker, or Aaron Everham now, was racing there. You just don't know who you're watching, and there's always good racing there. And for a while, I felt like streaming was kind of helping that. And this is probably a whole nother topic, but now I feel like it's kind of spun off, and there's, you know, 15 different streaming services you have to buy to see. Oh yeah, you want to watch this? You got to buy this one. You want to watch this? You got to buy this one. And I think that now that's kind of having a reverse effect on things almost. I used to love throwing on Flow and going and watching a random dirt track out in the Midwest, like their weekly show. Like that was, I saw some great stuff from like Marshalltown, right? Like it's like a random place, but now it's really shifted more towards being like the big tour stuff on there. You still have a couple local ones, but it's not like it was a few years ago.
I like seeing the difference between so I like tuning into the IMCA part of the country every once in a while and seeing how they're doing things. Like there's little things that I feel like all these major, like the UMP, the Rush, IMCA, there's all these different sanctioning bodies for your local racetracks, right? And I love tuning into IMCA because we don't have IMCA here, right? And just seeing the little things they do differently than we do here, and being like, oh, that's fucking cool. I don't like that. That's cool. That's, you know what I mean? I really like the picking and choosing stuff. And it's just cool to see how the other parts of the country operate. So I love the streaming thing, but like you said, it's gotten to the point now you need to spend almost $1,000 a year to watch all the stuff that you used to be able to watch for $10 a month or whatever. You know, it's because Dirt Vision's like what, $300 a year, and flow is like,
that.
what's that?
I think it's more than that. I think it's like
It might be more than
350,
that.
400.
That's crazy. And I mean, and I understand that they have a lot of overhead to do what they do, and I'm not begrudging them for their business model or whatever. It really sucks for the local guy, because you could have went to an entire season at your local dirt track and watched live for that kind of money.
Yep.
You really could have. I mean, you may not have been able to go there and buy 36 hot dogs and like live it up at the racetrack, but you could have went to every race for sure, you know. But I think that the big series have kind of annexed what you used to see. Like, I remember when I was a kid going to McKean and like being like, we got to get there really early or you won't be able to find a seat. And hopefully we get back to that point. But right now it's like, it's a struggle to pull people in the door. And the bummer is the racing there's awesome right now. And that's the part that kind of bums me out about all of it, is we've had some straight up barn burner races there. Not even just in my class, but like in everything. I mean, we've had some stacked crate late fields there. We've had a couple of, or at least one really good super race there. I mean, it's been a really good time, you know, and it's a bummer that you can't pull a bunch of people in the door to come see that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's that, and the people that you are getting there, I mean, they're generally older, right? I think one of the struggles is getting young people engaged now. The track up here that I really like running at, Legion Speedway, that track owner gives away at least one bicycle every weekend to a kid, right? And he does a lot for the kids to try and get them pulled in. Even getting younger kids into racing, I think, is going to go a long way. In Connecticut, there's some really cool stuff going on with that Johnny Morgillo did with the driver development program and kind of renting out cars. But I feel like that's a big part of getting those stands filled, is getting kids engaged and getting that younger generation interested, right? Because there's so much to do digitally now that I feel like it's competing with that.
Well, and me and Daniel talk about that to the point where we're like blue in the face all the time. Every time we have a race car discussion, it's like, how do we get kids in the door? How do we get kids in the door? Because every single time I go to a racetrack, I feel like the audience gets older and older and older. And it's like, dude, to save the sport, we got to drag children in the door. Yeah. And it sounds like a weird business strategy on the surface because kids don't have money. But like, if you can get the kids, you'll get their parents too, right? Because parents ultimately just want to find something to do with their kids. And the heck are you watching over there, Daniel? What the heck was that, dude?
Sorry, that's on me. Keep talking.
but ultimately, like, getting the kids in the door secures an entire generation of people who will keep coming for 30 years or whatever. You know what I mean? They'll at least consider it on a Friday night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it goes back to the social media thing too, right? You get that kid there, they like what they see. Now they're posting on social media. It spreads like wildfire. Likewise, if it's a negative experience, it spreads like wildfire too. But getting the kids there is a big thing.
Something to barge right in here with is that nationally, dirt track racing and racing in general is at an all-time high in popularity. Now, I know we're talking about local tracks, and a lot of these local tracks use the national series to bring in to get exposure. I mean, they do make good money off of these shows, whether it be a regional touring series or that of Lucas, World of Outlaws, whatever. Pick your poison. However, the unfortunate part is we haven't seen it trickle down to the lower levels yet. Now, I will say, Jesse, and you travel more, almost as much as I do, to these local tracks, and you can see certain tracks having more people in the stands than others, but it feels like it's in an all-time low regionally. And I've gone to places, and I know I feel like we've talked about Hummingbird closing down, whether it be on here or in the past. And I like to say that's an amazing racetrack, one of my favorite places to visit, and they are amazing people. And unfortunately, they couldn't get people in the stands to support an all-time high pit gate. The back of the house was filled with race cars, and the front of the house was maybe the lowest it's ever been. And it's crazy because that's a place that I feel like I've heard everybody talk about, and when I'm there, of course the drivers are there. Everybody, like, we did almost like a mini state line invasion the one night when I brought a couple cars down and a whole bunch of people came down anyways. But there was like nobody in the stands. I think the ULMS race did okay there, but I guess the thing is like, do we ever have the national series success trickle down to the local dirt tracks, or is weekly racing just not it? Is it just such a, whether it's an economic factor or a, man, I don't really feel like going every single week, but man, when the big boys are in town, we'll show up. And I don't know if this is true everywhere, because again, like I said, regionally, it's spotty. Some tracks are struggling. I think there's a more struggling than aren't. But when do we come to a point where it trickles down?
See, that's kind of what I was getting at, right? So like the bigger the touring series get, the bigger the divide seems to become on the local level, right? So the more larger than life you make the NASCAR of dirt track racing, which is like your World of Outlaws and your Lucas Oils, and the more larger than life those people feel, the more your local guy kind of fails in comparison, right? And like we've had some breakthrough moments. Like I think Dave Hess doing as well as he did at the Dome was a big breakthrough moment, right? And people started to realize, oh wait, like maybe local track racing isn't that bad, and I'll bet you would have probably seen an uptick in those like loyalists to the internet, like the internet streaming crowd, right? You probably saw right after that, the following season, you probably saw a huge uptick in people who knew Dave Hess was a local guy, right? Once you see, oh wait, maybe our guys are competing on this level, maybe I should watch, you know what I mean? Sometimes that has a tendency to change things a little bit, but I think the better the national series do, it seems to be creating a divide between them and the local tracks. And I don't know. I feel like you got to find a way to make your local guys look like heroes to kids. I mean, you got to find a way to make them heroes again, and I feel like that's the reason there's no trickle down, is because yes, nationally, on a national level, on the big tracks and the big series, dirt track racing is doing better than ever. But the backbone of racing will always be local tracks, whether it be asphalt, dirt track, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you don't have local tracks, you don't have a breeding ground for new talent. You just don't. And not only that, if you close all the local tracks and all you keep is the crown jewel tracks, you're left with no tracks and no series. Because most of those touring series, most of their schedule is just local tracks, and we kind of lose the bigger picture, which is there's a lot of awesome stuff going on right down the street from your house, and you got to tune in. You know what I mean? And it's the tracks need to do a better job bringing people. The drivers need to do a better job of communicating, I'm going to be here. Let's do some cool shit. You know what I mean? I don't know how you bridge the divide, but we need to make local track guys superheroes to little kids again, because, fundamentally that's where you get people in the door, and not kids in general, but like creating almost a larger than life persona. And the way you do that now is social media, which comes back full circle to the start of this conversation, which is like, you need to have a really good plan for social media, And you need to understand that as your social media grows, it's not all good. Part of being a social media hit and having a ton of engagement is that most of it's negative, because that's what drives engagement, is negative stuff. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the internet, right? So I think we got to stop worrying about what people think and just make a good show again. You see what I'm saying? Your local track has to stop worrying about what Tom has to say about whether or not you canceled on Friday, because we've all seen the boomer angry rants about canceling the races, and like how they make these big grandstanding posts about how this track ain't what it used to be, and and thanks Obama. We've seen that. You know what I'm saying? We've all seen the posts, right? And you as a racetrack owner have to know that when you see that post, that means you're doing your job right. But it's not that easy, because it freaking hurts when you put your life savings into this place to see everybody shitting on it every week. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, I definitely want to lose money and cancel the show. That's exactly what I want to do.
That was
You know what I mean?
exactly what my goal was.
But like, what's the alternative? Oh, hey, yeah, they don't cancel. They put warm-ups out on the track at 11 o'clock. Young people aren't going to want to go see that. Like,
or
young
the track
people
turns
don't want
into
to
a
be there
cornfield.
forever.
Yeah,
we have
right.
really tiny attention spans, and there's a few nights out of the year where I won't bitch about having too many classes, because it's almost like that event is known for having a million classes, right? Like, that just kind of like if you go to the IMCA Super Nationals and you don't know what you're getting yourself in for, good luck, brother.
Yeah.
You're gonna be there for 2 weeks. Like, they're running 25 heat races tonight, dude. You better buckle up. All right. And I think that's all fine and dandy when it comes to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think getting people to the racetrack is to make sure that you're not gonna be there till 2 a.m. And some tracks are getting their shows together and making them quicker, but man, there's too many classes. That's another discussion for another time.
Too many classes that are all the same.
Yeah, don't get me started, brother. We might hurt some feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse and I are our team. Cancel literally everything.
Oh, yeah.
I love when there's 4-car divisions and they all look identical, and it's like, oh, that one has a slightly different tire.
I always say that that's the problem with go-kart racing and why it's not as popular as I think it could be. Like, regionally, there's no way to see, they're all the same flat cart. We have the outlaw winged carts around here, but that's it, right? It's all flat carts or that.
Mm-hmm.
And they all look the same, and no one knows what's going. Like, I've been doing go-kart photos for like 2 years. I don't know what's going on if I don't got a lineup and at least know one person in the class.
Well, half of them have the same motor. It's just varying degrees of openness.
Right.
You got the gold plate, blue plate, purple plate, black plate, yellow plate, and then now we got the stock heavy, bone stock light,
right,
open stock.
And I would love to kind of pivot this conversation. I know we're kind of running a little bit longer than usual on this, but I would love to hear you guys, because I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground when it comes to rule sets, especially when it comes to that. So we talk about how everything's thriving at the national level. However, they kind of govern the rule sets, at these local tracks. Dave, I don't know how it is up there because I don't know what classes you run. I'm assuming like big block modified, so are probably one of the big ones up there in the New England area.
For us, on the dirt side, I think there's the sprint cars in New England. They're a traveling series. There's Granite State Mini Sprints, which is the micro stuff. And then there's a lot of like dirt car sportsman, Northeast modified stuff around. So it's dirt car.
to kind of go on this, what I'm kind of talking about here is, so the rule sets seem for these classes that people want to see have been getting more expensive to be competitive. And a lot of guys don't want to get into something if they're not going to be competitive. I feel like the days of just a guy having fun and, winning a couple races in his career is kind of over unless you come with a serious program and some serious money of these upper level divisions, whether it be, a lot of people are talking about the 410 sprint car rules. Everybody's in a hubbub about that. Super late models, tires, aero, you name it. The droop rule was that big one for a while, that the rules that really pissed everybody off because everybody had to change all their shit. When it comes to making rules for these classes, and whether, we live in a world where all these classes all look the same and we all have the same bitches, they're all just a little bit different. When it comes to making a rule set, do you think there's a happy medium right now where something could happen at the national level for either supers or sprints to maybe drive costs down in any way whatsoever, to where maybe that could have some domino effects to make purses a little bit cheaper because the cars are cheaper, which means the gate could be cheaper? Or are we just going to be in this never ending, okay, so now these are the rules because we keep either getting put in more of a box or they opened up the rules, so now everybody is now in a spending war to be the best and the greatest at XYZ. Oh, the new shock rule. We gotta spend, here's 5,000 extra. You know what I mean? It just seems like we get to a point where even in the local classes that seem to all have the standard rules, Jesse, at least here regionally, it seems like they start with good intentions, and now we're at a point where some of these rules just seem like, we want to get these guys to spend some money, or wow, this could be cheaper if we did it this way. I don't know what your guys' opinions about it, but I feel like it kind of starts at a national level to have this trickle down effect, because nobody is gonna not use the rules of what everybody else is using. The touring guys.
So I have a little bit of a different opinion about this than a lot of people. So I think here's my problem, right? And I want to word this in a way where I'm not like shitting on any specific series in general, because I don't think I am. I think that this is a problem in the whole industry, and it's really hard at this point to point the finger at one particular person, one particular series. It's just an industry-wide problem, right? So every series, as far as I can tell, gets out of hand price-wise the same way. This guy wants to run this shock package because he thinks it's better, or he thinks it's more affordable, and it might be more affordable at the time. But then when the series switches over to that shock package, all of a sudden that cheap shock package is now twice the price, right? Conveniently, it just went up, right? Because now there's a tax for the series on it, right? Or you have, and then they just gave that guy, that guy got what he wanted, right? So now this guy wants, well, if he's allowed to get that, I should be able to get this. Well, okay, fuck it. You can run whatever shocks you want. But you got to buy them from this person. We're all taking a cut off all, right? So you just started an arms race for shocks, right? And you could scale that with every part on the race car. If you have a spec tire, like some people do a spec tire where it's your right rear has to be this one. Some people do a spec tire where both rears have to be this one. Some people do a spec tire where all your tires have to be this one. Ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're not going to keep everybody on the same spec tire, right? It starts with one tire. Oh, we're only running 50s, but we're allowed to run 44s for these 3 shows. Then everybody who wins is on a 44, and the guys that had 50s, those are useless, right? Because they're never going to compete in a short-term race like that. Now, like, I'm using American Racer numbers, sorry. But For you Hoosier guys that are out there screaming right now at the whatever you're listening to this on. But the problem with all this stuff is they break the rule this one time for this certain event because there was sponsor money involved and it was kind of a gray area, and okay, for this event we'll do this, and then it's this whole can of worms for the next 2 years. Every time you guys have a drivers meeting, will you let so and so do that at so and so? And it's like, well, we did that because they put up 10 grand for the show, like, leave us alone. You know what I mean? So, but you keep consistently seeing people in these series, their ego gets involved and then money gets involved, and you know what, screw it, we're not paying for it anyways, we'll make a little bit of money off of this, let's just open it up, right? And that's how a series gets out of hand. It happens a little bit at a time, it doesn't happen all at once. And then fast forward to right now, you've hit kind of a stalemate where, like, let's say the crate late models, right? They've got open shock rules and they're running, I think they're running progressive springs and things like that. I might be speaking out of turn, but maybe they're not. I don't know. But the reality is it's gotten to a point where a lot of new guys are looking at that like, I don't even know if that's the direction I want to go. I mean, it's basically a super late with a crate motor in it. You know what I'm saying? So you're in this weird position where you're like, maybe I'll go a different direction. I think what's ultimately going to happen is you're going to see a lot of local series go belly up. I just do. Like, I think Rush will be safe because Rush does a lot of work on the back end to like keep tracks invested. There always seems to be a ton of people at Rush shows. They plan their events really well, so they stay relevant really, really well. But there's a lot of these series that are, let's say, smaller, and they're not doing as well. They're just not. And some of them are what you would call quote unquote premier series, right? But they're struggling to pull people in the door, struggling with car counts. I think you're going to see a lot of these groups, these organizations go under, and I think you're going to replace it with unlikely candidates, right? I think a lot of local tracks are going to go away from buying into these bigger organizations, and they're going to gravitate towards things that are a little bit easier to police, right? So I know in New York, mod lights are a huge deal. Like, I watch all these YouTube videos. These guys get like 30 mod lights to a show. I know guys that are racing up there with like a $10,000 car, racing $3 to $5 grand to win events all the time. I mean, your return on investment in those cars is insane. I mean, whether you like them, hate them, whatever, it just makes sense, right? And sure, mod lights are one of those cars where you can spend kind of whatever you want to spend. But I know a lot of guys who built budget cars or bought budget cars, and they go out and compete very well all the time. Because ultimately it boils down to how much work are you willing to put in. You know what I'm saying? And I think classes like that, like our mini late models, like micro sprints, like Dave races, there's the Excel mods up in New York. I think classes like that will fill the gap. I think they make sense. You don't have to pay these crazy. You don't have all the overhead of bringing in a series, and there's this organization behind it. You got to pay all these taxes to the organization, and if you don't, they'll shut you down, and they'll rip away your ability to provide points, and like all these things that make all these bigger organizations super, like, let's say, appealing to somebody who's going to buy a car. They're going to be the same organizations that kind of make them unappealing to guys on a local level trying to make it run on a racetrack. Because you can bring in, like, let's take ULMS, for example. Like I said, I'm not singling out ULMS. I just know more about their business model than I do really any other organization, I guess. So you can just host your own super race, and it'll cost you a lot less money than bringing in ULMS. Sure, you don't get the promotional machine of ULMS. You don't get the points. You don't get all that stuff. But those are all things you can learn. Those are all things you can cultivate in-house. You can get a really good social media guy. You can find a guy who's really good at getting your advertisements out there. You can pay local race car drivers to come. You can pay NASCAR drivers to come race in your event. You can do all these things that drag people in the door of your racetrack, and you don't have to pay the tax. You don't have to pay the touring series tax, right? Now take that same thing and scale it down by 1,000, right? Like, let's say all of your, because right now we talk about all the time the stock car crisis we have right now. We have street stocks, pro stocks, pure stocks, hobby stocks, bone stocks, fucking mini stocks, renegade stocks, 6-cylinder stocks, fucking 4-cylinder. There's fucking so many stock car classes, right? And there's the rush stocks. Let's not forget those. I mean, and you go there. Every track runs a different rule set. There's 4 cars in every class, and there's 4 classes of these cars. Why has nobody consolidated this? Like, I understand if you're a street stock guy and you have a $20,000 street stock motor, I understand that kind of sucks, right? Sell that motor to a UMP guy or something and join whatever division ends up being made, because you will all be much happier running in a class that has 30 cars a week than you will be winning the battle to keep your motor and running against 4 dudes. Okay? It's going to look like a way bigger deal to everybody who watches. It's going to be way more fun for you, and you'll feel like you did something. Consolidate all these damn classes. Either consolidate them or watch them just disappear. That's really your only 2 options. That's the part that frustrates me, is like, the tracks are in such a rock and a hard place, because I can't imagine what it's like. Like when Kurt and Bonnie came in to try to take over McKean, and it's like, okay, what stock car class do you want to have? And then they get 300 messages. Make sure you run the pure stocks. Make sure you run the pro stocks. Make sure you run the hobby stocks, but don't run the hobby stocks and Erie's rules. Run the hobby stocks and Bradford's rules. Don't run the, like, I mean, you know, they're probably like, holy shit, hold on. What? You know what I mean? It's, as a track owner, how do you even, where do you start? I mean, you have to just pick a rule set and hope people show up. Because
whatever they choose, they get berated on.
Exactly. Whatever they choose, they're wrong. Exactly. Whatever they choose, they're wrong. And whatever they choose, they're right too. Because every track I go to, there's 4 of these cars in each class. You'll have 3 stock car, quote unquote, classes, and there's 5 cars in each class. If we consolidated them all into one class, you'd have a full field of cars. They'd be running B mains. It's just, what's frustrating to me is, like, nobody wants to consolidate. Like, from the drivers, when you talk to the drivers about this, they're so pig-headed about it. They're like, well, I refuse to run a 602 or a 604 or a 358 or I refuse to do that because I got all this money in this. It's like, well, okay, so you'd rather run the motor you have and go out and run for $200 against 4 dudes than consolidate all of these cars into one class. Now you have leverage. You have purchase power within the class. You can all get together as 12 to 15 cars and go, hey, you either pay us this or we're leaving. We'll take this show somewhere else. Like, they're cutting off their own nose to spite their face. You see what I'm saying? And that's the part, is like a fellow race car driver, I just kind of watch as this train is going off the tracks, and it's like, man, I'd pick one. Every one of you guys start a massive Facebook group chat. Be like, there's 300 people in this group chat, and we all run stock cars within a 100-mile radius. We all need to get together and come up with a rule set that everybody's willing to. And I get it, you're not going to get them all, right? But if you can get 50 of them to go, yeah, I could do that, then you're like, fuck yeah. Okay, we're going to take the chassis rules from this organization, the motor rules from this organization, and we're just going to run with it. Whatever's the cheapest for everybody to convert to, and then we're going to start our own organization. We're going to try to sell it to the tracks. We have this many cars, and we will be there. You see what I'm saying? It's easier said than done, I know. But if I was in a situation where the mini late models showed up, and there was 3 different divisions of mini late models. One had 1000cc motors, one had 600cc motors, and one had an open 600cc motor, and one had a restrictor plate 600cc motors, and every one of them ran, and there was 3 fucking cars in the class. I would be like pulling everybody into a group and going, what are we doing? We look like morons. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would be like, guys, listen, there's so many of us. What are we doing here? Let's consolidate. Let's figure out what we got to do. I'll help you do it. Whatever you need. You can bring all your cars to my shop and I'll help you convert it if we need to. But we got to figure this out because we can't keep racing 3-car features. You know what I'm saying? And that's the part that I get frustrated by is I feel like we have got pretty complacent in general in this industry. And it's just like, well, whoever we show up with, we race with, you know. But I would like to see people get a little more organized and like look at the bigger picture. Sorry, that was long-winded, but
it's definitely something. I think that's why, not to bring it back to iRacing before we wrap this up, but it's kind of nice to be on iRacing where they have, these are our set of cars.
yes.
Get fucked. Like, you know, they're not going to go add every stock car in the world. They're not going to go add every late model version in the world. They're like, here are 3 late models. Enjoy, you know.
Right. Agreed.
All right. Oh, you go, Dave.
I was just gonna say a lot of it goes back to cost, like you were saying, Jesse. I mean, that's the big divide. But
it's not even just cost; it's cost compared to competitiveness, right?
Yeah.
It's when you compare a class of car, right? The 10 to 15 grand price range seems like if you want a class to sell and people to care about it, how do you make it so that you can go buy the car and race the car for under 15 grand, right? That seems to be the purchase price that people are willing to pay. And it doesn't matter after that because they're hooked after that, right? Once you get people addicted to racing, they will go to great lengths to stay in the sport. So how do you get your shade tree mechanic? Like if you're a shade tree mechanic working on Camaros and shit, right? You would have to be borderline goofy to think to yourself, I really want to race. I wonder how much a late model costs. And then you talk to a guy who raced the late model. He's like, oh, I got fucking 50 grand in this crate late. Then you're like, okay, well, I'll just go buy a fucking Corvette. You know what I mean? I mean, that's where we're at, right? And then you go talk to like a mini stock guy running SCDRA rules or something, right? And it's like, oh, well, how much do you have in this Honda? Oh, well, I bought the car for $3 grand, and then I took the motor out and totally rebuilt it. I've got like 15 grand in the motor, and then I got, you know, like when you start doing the math, they're probably sitting there thinking, I could build a pretty nasty street car for this. I'm just going to do that, you know. I mean, and I can sell that and make money. I mean, you can go build the problem with racing is it's gotten to a point where to pull a guy off the street, it just doesn't make sense. It's all the families that have been lifers in this industry to boot that are keeping it here. You got to pull in new blood. You got to pull in guys off the street, guys that otherwise wouldn't be in a race car, you know?
Exactly. And anything on the national level is unattainable, right? Like even, but you're not going to spend, right? Even Chili Bowl, right? One race a year that you're going to go drop 100 grand on that car. No, you're not going to do that. Even micros now, they're 30, 40 grand fully built. Like it's like the cost of everything has just gotten out of hand. And I think the more that can get reeled in, the better, but it ultimately just goes back to the divide between national and regional and then cost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys in the micros could do kind of what the Sharps did, where you like ban exotic metals and run a spec tire, stock engines, sealed ECUs. You could even unseal the ECUs if you don't want to do that part. But like you
Good
could
luck rolling that back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
you're gonna make every car obsolete at this point for the most part.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, if it gets to a point of ridiculousness and you have a group of 10 guys, it's like you could just emulate that rule set. And really, I mean, you could use the same car and just go back in time and buy all cheaper parts, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a way to do it, I'm sure. And there's a demographic for it, especially like if you're in an area where people sincerely want to run those cars, but they're just the price has gotten ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You could do basically what Fast Track did with the late models when we first started doing the crate late thing around here. It's not hard to get a spec shock made, you know.
Yeah.
Hell, you guys could run the sharp spec shocks if you wanted to, you know. And I think where there's a will, there's a way. But like you said, once everybody's bought in, that's where people start digging their heels in. I just paid $5,000 for this injection unit. I'm not going back. You know what I mean? But you've also got to maintain all that stuff. So good luck. You know what I mean? It's not a one-time purchase, you know? So you're married to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you can't, like, it's tough to unwind it. And,
it's hard to close Pandora's box once it opens.
Mm-hmm.
Can't unlearn things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, man, long episode, but it's due for not being on here for so long. Just a quick shout out. Great Lake Speed Shop, our podcast network sponsor. Make sure you go see Bud and the gang today to get you ready for 2024. They also got a cool little sign business there too. They almost have an all-in-one shop there if you need to get it wrapped. Not to say, you know, we also have our Carpy Sprint Company, best wraps in the world. But there are options out there. Want to make sure, but you know, Carpies, our homies, and Close Racing Supply, Martin Dynamics, the Mountain Radio Station. Anything else? Anything else, guys? Final thoughts? Any last messages, dude?
If you're looking to do something next weekend, come to the Fall Classic at McKean County on October 3rd and 4th.
And 5th.
And 5th. The 3rd is the practice, so it's 4th and 5th is the races. If you're looking to go camping, come camp there. My mom and brother own a restaurant right down the street. They're doing breakfast with champions, I think is what they're calling it. We're inviting a bunch of race car drivers. The Mountain Radio Station is going to be there. It's going to be driver interviews and all kinds of stuff. Place is going to be popping in the morning. And yeah, I mean, if you want to bump elbows with some of your favorite race car drivers, I mean, there's going to be a lot of big names in town this weekend. And I'm sure they're all going to be hungry in the morning because it's a multiple day event. You know how that goes. So, yeah, stop at DJ's Kitchen. It's right down the street. It's right on the corner by the fairgrounds. You're going to pass it going to the racetrack. So can't miss it.
To add to that, night 1 of Fall Classic, the first night of racing. The 3,000 to win Whoa Nelly Fall Brawl, dude. I am so thankful that McKean decided to let us make it a Whoa Nelly show. They contacted me about it. It was kind of cool to see how Fall Classic came together this year. Honestly, I want to say Jeremy Perry was the one that kind of came up with the marketing for that to be like, hey, you know, you got all the mod guys. Let's make it a Whoa Nelly show and let's pack the place for $3,000 to win. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Kurt and Bonnie Stebbins, for letting us do the thing. Super late models on a Saturday night at McKean too. It is going to be great. If you still have your car together coming into next weekend, please make sure you support Kurt and Bonnie. They're putting up some money for everybody, and I appreciate everybody. End of the year coming up. I don't know if I have anything else. It's been so long since I've done a podcast, I don't even know what to do with my hands. All right, thank you, Dave, for coming on. Jesse, you know, you're fat or whatever.
Yeah, dude. You know, Dave can't drive, but he's a pretty solid podcast guest, dude. You know, He is terrible to race with, but he's a nice guy. You know,
Jesse's just an iRacing bully. That's all.
that's not what it
It
is.
is
dude.
what it is.
You're the bully, dude. Everybody knows it, dude.
Jesse,
Yeah.
before we go, Jesse has the world famous. It's called the Isidore, actually, in the iRacing community, where he just parks on your nose and then drives off and then goes, "Your fault" when you wreck.
Yeah.
That's the Bodio move.
Started the night off at Fairbury with that tonight. Jesse going 10 miles per hour coming out of 2 because he threw a bomb on lap 1, turn 1.
I plead the fifth.
All right, guys. We'll see you hopefully sooner than later.
All right, buddy.
Later. Thanks.